because she doesn't teach it politically. She teaches it, right? It's not politically charged. It's just historically accurate is the right way to say it. Yeah. Also, February of 2018, this memorandum came from an official from the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. And it was addressed to the members of the Judiciary Committee, all the judges. And this was pretty heavy, right? Basically, this is what he said. As a professor of international law, the former secretary of the UN Human Rights Committee, co-author of the book United Nations Human Rights Committee Case Law, and currently serving as the UN independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order, I have come to understand that the lawful political status of the Hawaiian Islands is that of a sovereign nation state in continuity, but a nation state that is under a strange form of occupation resulting by the United States, resulting from an illegal military occupation and a fraudulent annexation. As such, international laws, the Hague and Geneva Conventions, require that governance and legal matters within the occupied territory of the Hawaiian Islands must be administered by the application of the laws of the occupied state, in this case the Hawaiian Kingdom, not the domestic laws of the occupier, the United States. What is interesting here is he says a strange form of occupation. The reason why it's strange is because under the laws of occupation, you're supposed to administer the laws of the occupied state. We don't have that here. See, that's what's strange. We have what is called the state of Hawaii. You know, we have the United States government having their laws here. You know, so that's the strange aspect, right? But what's important is he's referring to the Hague and Geneva Conventions. These international treaties apply to laws of war, okay? In particular, the laws of occupation, occupied territories. Now, the Hague and Geneva Conventions,
in the break room, in the front right.
The independent expert was saying you're supposed to administer the laws of the occupied state. Well, he didn't say what happens if you don't administer the laws of the occupied state, except he gave little, small little nuggets. One word he used was, you cannot plunder private property. So plunder, that's interesting. Plunder is another word for pillaging. Pillaging is prohibited by the Hague and Geneva Conventions. That's a specific article. It also says in there that the state of Hawaii courts should not enable or collude in the wrongful taking of lands. Well, enable and collude, that's conspiracy. So he kind of alludes to the violations, but he doesn't delve into it. He just says you're supposed to do it. Well, Amnesty International is pretty straightforward, and this is what the definition of what happens when you don't follow the Hague and Geneva Conventions. War crimes. War crimes are crimes that violate the laws or customs of war defined by the Geneva and Hague Convention. Okay, so that's, what you have here, some heavy terms, right? I'm a retired captain for an army. I know these terms. I just never thought it would be applied to Hawaii, right? But here this UN independent expert is saying it. Now, this UN independent expert, Dr. Desaias, he's not saying anything new. We've been teaching this since we got back from The Hague in 2001, which I'll show you. This is part of my doctoral dissertation. My law journal article is all on this stuff, right? What is important or profound is the fact that it came from the United Nations. That's the difference, right? Somebody outside actually is now seeing what Hawaii is. And he had to admit that he had come to understand, which means he didn't know this before, like many of us. So if we didn't know it here, imagine what the international community knew. Not too much. But it's through that education that they're starting to learn. Yeah, and that's what's important. Also, the latest is Council Member Ruggles. This is big. She's a councilwoman. A councilwoman, Ruggles, Jennifer Ruggles, she attended a presentation that I gave last year in Hilo, which was also attended by Mayor Harry Kim and another councilwoman. I can't remember her name. But the topic was Hawaii in a state of war with the United States and the Commission of War Crimes. That's some heavy stuff. But in the presentation, which is the PowerPoint, not the same one I'm doing here, the audience was taken aback, right? Which is not a problem. They're learning something different. Well, she came up to me after and she said, is there any more information I can read up on? So I gave her one of my briefs on a state of war, and I was contacted by her 1 year later, which was about a month ago. And she asked if we could meet in Hilo, because I live in Big Island. I live on the Big Island. And she asked specific questions with reference to what she read and her understanding, meaning she did her due diligence. And she said she has come to the conclusion that, yeah, she can see that Hawaii's occupied. And what do I do? I said, well, legislation, right? Remember the Hague and Geneva Convention says that you're supposed to administer the laws of the occupied state. She's part of a council that legislates. They enact ordinances. State of Hawaii legislature enacts statutes, right? But both statutes and ordinances are used by the courts, which was the subject of Dr. Desai's communication to the state of Hawaii judges. So she was basically implied in that memorandum, because those judges make decisions based upon law, either passed by the county councils or the legislature or the Congress. Okay. So I recommended to her that what she does now from now on, she has to keep in mind that she has awareness now. Because once you have awareness that Hawaii is occupied, that's one of the elements that is fulfilled for incurring criminal liability. Okay. So what I recommended to her was pose the right question to your corporation counsel, which is the county government version of an attorney general. And ask specifically, after laying out Hawaii's occupation, referring to Desai's letter, referring to the Larson case in the Netherlands and international law, whether or not she is incurring criminal liability. And she said, yeah, I can do that. I said, well, I would recommend, because this is a very complex issue, this is not like you just wing it. Retain an attorney to write it for you who can speak to the issue. And I know this one attorney is good. So I recommended this attorney. She retained him, posed the question, unsatisfactory response by the corporation counsel. It warranted a follow-up letter by the attorney. At that point, the attorney did not refute Hawaii's occupation or war crimes. She became a whistleblower. Now she's advocating for the rights of protected persons under the Geneva Convention and the Hague Convention. She came to that conclusion on her own. Now what's pretty mind-blowing is she's a young girl, but I tell you that young girl is like it's not even a firecracker, that's a dynamite, right? And what's amazing is she's Haole and she's American. Yeah. Her attorney is Haole and he's American. And they're telling the Hawaiian, you gotta follow international law because the Hawaiian Kingdom still exists. Yeah. The irony of all ironies. And the Corporation Council was so unsatisfactory in how he's responding, it was pretty bad. But she's moving ahead, and she's gonna have a town hall meeting on Monday. And yeah, she's stepping up. Yeah, she's stepping up. So mahalo to Jennifer. Because what a lot of people need to realize is this idea of Hawaii as a country, it is not an issue of race, color, creed, right, or gender. It's do you know what you know? And are you able to take kuleana with what you do? See, and she's displaying that. So that's, hats off to her. So, State of Hawaii Supreme Court made this statement in 2013. State of Hawaii versus Kaulia. It said, whatever may be said regarding the lawfulness of its origins, the state of Hawaii is now a lawful government. Now that statement is pretty bold, because it's pretty, not only bold, it's pretty bad. Whatever its origin, it's legal now. That's like saying, your car was stolen, whatever happened, I own it. Yeah. That's what that's saying. You would never guess that would come out of a Supreme Court. But because people are raising the awareness in court proceedings about Hawaii's occupation, yeah, state of Hawaii not legal, that prompted that. And now this court case is used by attorneys and prosecutors to dismiss whatever anybody say. Now the problem is, there's some criminal liability there on the international law when you have victims, not just the statement, but if you use this statement against somebody in violation of their rights, now you have a victim, and that could be a war crime victim. Okay. So 2 issues resonate from this statement. First, what is the state of Hawaii's origin? Right? That's what people should think. What is it? Second, what is considered a lawful government? Right? You just don't take it for granted. Well, a lawful government is either de jure or de facto. Okay? De jure is lawful, elected, appointed, commissioned. De facto is a successful revolution. You succeeded in the overthrow, you are now the new government. Just like the United States became a de facto government after they defeated the British, because they used to be a British colony, right, or British colonies. Once they won the revolution, now they're a de facto government. But it took them some years to fight. Actually, it took them 7 years to fight and succeed. So today's perception, today people view Hawaii as the 50th state. Right? That's an assumption. When I was in the Army, don't assume. Because you make an ass out of you and me.
Yeah.
Assume. I remember a lieutenant colonel once told me, Lieutenant, never assume. Know. And if you don't know, go get the information. Don't make it up. Yes, sir. Let's get back to get that information. The predecessor of the state of Hawaii was called the Territory of Hawaii, which was formed in 1900. And the territory was a successor of the Republic of Hawaii that was formed in 1894. And the Republic was a successor of the provisional government, who used to be called the Hawaiian Kingdom government. Okay, so that's the origin of the state of Hawaii. All you really had since 1893 was the same car, just changed the name. It was a carjacking, that's all it was. 3 branches of government in the kingdom, a constitutional monarch called the Hawaiian Kingdom. 1893, overthrow, provisional government. All they did was change the name of the government and the name of the monarch to a president. Everything stayed the same. Then they forced everyone in government to sign oaths of allegiance to this regime. And that was under the protection of the United States Marines. And when you sign your oath of allegiance to the new regime, you can stay at work. And those who refused to sign were fired. And that is where the song Kalananapua comes from, which is Mele Alohaina, the Patriot song, where it says, do not sign the enemy, yeah, with its sin of annexation and loss of civil rights. That's the translation of it, one of the lyrics. Then the provisional government changed their name in 1894 to the Republic. Then the Republic was changed to the Territory of Hawaii in 1900. And then 1959, State of Hawaii changed the name from the territory. So really, nothing really changed, except name, right? Just a regime change. It wasn't really an overthrow. It was actually a hijacking or carjacking of a car. And right now the car used to be brown, now it's red, white, and blue. But it's the same color. Now the authority of the state of Hawaii, where did that come from? 1959, Public Law 86-3, an act to provide for the admission of the state of Hawaii into the Union. That's 1959 Statehood Act. Now this Statehood Act is a municipal law. It's a law of the United States, created by Congress. Keep that in mind, right? Keep that in mind. The authority of the Territory of Hawaii is this act, an act to provide a government for the Territory of Hawaii. And that was passed in 1900. Now, in this act, it makes specific reference that the phrase, the laws of Hawaii, as used in this act, without qualifying words, shall mean the Constitution and laws of the Republic of Hawaii. So it's making a direct connection to the Republic. Who's the Republic? Oh, sorry. This is an American law, again, municipal law. Who is the Republic? Well, July 3rd, 1894, it was declared by Constitutional Convention. It's kind of a misnomer. It's not like everybody participated. It's only those who actually are part of what is called an insurgency. Insurgency. Keep that in mind. Municipal laws, insurgency. It's gonna come up soon in another slide. The Republic was not a government. They're actually an insurgency. Okay. And the authority of the provisional government, January 17, 1893. This was a puppet government established by the United States ambassador. So keep in mind what also the Supreme Court said, whatever its origins, okay, you're starting to see how problematic the origins is becoming. Yeah. You also had an apology resolution where the United States in 1993 apologized for the overthrow. Admitted it was illegal. But whatever it says, that apology resolution is still an American law. And I can tell you right off the bat, a lot of the stuff in the apology resolution is wrong. It's not historically accurate. But whatever it is, it's still an American law. So keep in mind, American law, insurgency. So the 1993 Apology Resolution, Statehood Act, Territorial Act, all American laws passed by Congress. All passed by Congress. Now, a municipal law, by definition, is a law solely applying to citizens and inhabitants of a particular territory. Municipal laws have no effect outside of the country. It only applies within the country. So before the United States laws can apply to Hawaii, which was not a part of the United States in 1893, how did Hawaii become a part of the United States? That can only happen under a treaty of cession. You need a treaty where Hawaii actually became a part of the United States. It's like being adopted. You need adoption papers. Kidnapping does not make you have any authority over that person or that child. You need adoption papers. Right now, we got to find the adoption papers. Where's the treaty of cession? So, annexation under international law. According to Professor Oppenheim, cession of state territory is the transfer of sovereignty over state territory, state means country, by the owner state to another state. And the only form in which a cession can be effected is an agreement embodied in a treaty between the ceding and the acquiring state. So here we have the sovereign state and its government, another sovereign state and its government, because under international law, you have to separate the government from the state. The reason is you can overthrow a government without overthrowing the state. That's an incident of war, which is legal under international law. So like in 2003, the Iraqi government was overthrown by the United States, Saddam Hussein's government. But by the overthrow of Saddam Hussein's government, it did not mean Iraq ceased to exist. Iraq was still a country. That's called occupation, which the Hague and Geneva Conventions apply. Make sense? Okay. So, ceding of territory. One government will cede territory to another government, whether voluntary, they can negotiate during a state of peace, or involuntary, conquest, or a treaty of peace, which ends the war. Right? So, here's the United States of America. Did you know the United States really only made up of this part? How did America get all of that? People might say, oh, Native Americans. No. Actually, they got it from other states. First one was 1803, Louisiana Purchase. That means prior to 1803, all territory of France west of the Mississippi River, only French law applied. After 1803, American law. Now Congress can pass laws that have effect in that territory. Next, 1819, Spain ceded what we know as Florida today. Right? Prior to 1819, Spanish law, municipal law. After 1819, American municipal law. Congress can pass laws that affect that territory. Pacific Northwest, 1846. Prior to 1846, British municipal law. After 1846, American. And these were done under a state of peace. They weren't at war. This area here, large area, was actually Mexican territory. And that was ceded by the Treaty of Peace that ended the Mexican-American War. 1848, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. All lands north of the Mississippi were now American. So prior to 1848, Mexican municipal law. After 1848, American municipal law. That's how it works. Make sense?
Yep.
So how did Hawaii get annexed? Right? Well, a joint resolution to provide for annexing the Hawaiian Islands was passed by the United States Congress in 1898. The problem is, that's an American law. That's an American municipal law that is not a treaty. So how did Hawaii get annexed? It's not a treaty. So did it really get annexed? No, because US laws have no effect outside of its territory, right? Okay. Now, this is what the congressional record shows. Representative Thomas Ball from Texas in a debate regarding this so-called annexation. The annexation of Hawaii by joint resolution is unconstitutional, unnecessary, and unwise. That territory could only be constitutionally acquired by a treaty.
Smart man.
Everybody knew it.
Everybody.
Then Senator Augustus Bacon. See, they're going against those who are saying they can do anything in Congress. Senator Augustus Bacon says the annexation of foreign territory was necessarily and essentially the subject matter of a treaty, and that it could not be accomplished legally and constitutionally by a statute or a joint resolution. Now, the difference between a statute and a joint resolution: a statute is a bill that becomes an act. Okay? A joint resolution is a resolution making a statement. A resolution is really not a statute because it's not enforceable. It's actually a position, right? It's like House of Representatives and Senate says today is Groundhog Day, and it's a holiday. But it's not an enforceable law, right? But if you have a bill that becomes an act called Statehood Act, then you can execute that law to create it, right? So the joint resolution of annexation is not a statute, but they're both US laws. Okay? That's what Senator Augustus Bacon is saying. You still can't do that. Then what does the US Supreme Court say regarding municipal laws? The laws of no nation can justly extend beyond its own territories. They can have no force to control the sovereignty of any other nation. And then in 1936, they restate that statement by saying neither the Constitution, the federal Constitution, nor the laws called congressional laws have any force in foreign territory. So remember, all those laws passed by Congress, it has no force outside of US territory. But they go on to say that operations of the nation called the United States in such territory must be governed by treaties, international understandings, and compacts, and the principles of international law. So the word international law is literally defined as the law between nations. Inter is between. Intra is within. So international law, law between nations, not above nations, because these are sovereign nations. So any agreement they make or any custom they accept is international law. There is no lawmaking body. Some people confuse the United Nations as a lawmaking body. No, all they do is pass resolutions. What's a resolution? A position statement, right? It's not a statute. You don't hear a United Nations statute. What you hear is a treaty recognized by a UN resolution. Okay, then they're referring to an international law. So just a visual, here's Washington, D.C. US laws are limited to US territory because you have borders. Hawaii is not affected by American law unless Hawaii was annexed by a treaty, right? Yeah. Well, 90 years later, in 1988, the U.S. Department of Justice came up and stumbled over this information regarding Hawaii on another issue, referring to extending the territorial seas. They're looking at whether or not Congress could have any effect beyond the borders of the United States. They stumbled over Senator Augustus Bacon's statement, also Representative Ball from Texas. So they state, despite constitutional objections, Congress approved the joint resolution and President McKinley signed the measure in 1898. Nevertheless, whether this action demonstrates the constitutional power of Congress to acquire territory is certainly questionable. What was that? The Department of Justice in 1988 is going, what? How did you do that? What? Let's see, if it's out of sight, out of mind, you don't have to worry about it. But once you start to go into the history, then things start to get kind of crazy. Then they conclude, it is therefore unclear which constitutional power Congress exercised when it acquired Hawaii by a joint resolution. So now they're scratching their heads. But you see what happens when you get educated or you become aware? It gets you uncomfortable, right? Kind of puts a check on you. Now in 2001, the Permanent Court of Arbitration verified what was the status of Hawaii before 1893, before the United States showed up here. In the 19th century, the Hawaiian Kingdom existed as an independent state, recognized as such by the United States and Great Britain and other states or other countries. Now, what is important here is this term independence. People use it wrong today. A lot of sovereignty groups keep saying, we want to be independent. No, we're actually independent, right? Well, the reason why independence is important to know is because independence refers to the legal system over your territory. If it is your legal system alone, then that's an independent state. If you have more than one law in your territory, that is not an independent state. So a case in 19th century Japan. Japan was not recognized as an independent state. Because in Japan, if British, American, French citizens get into trouble in Japan, they could only be prosecuted under their law, not Japanese law. So what you have there is these European countries were not recognizing Japan's independence. So in 1881, King Kalakaua traveled to Japan, part of his world tour. He actually met with the Meiji Emperor. The Meiji Emperor actually asked King Kalakaua, would you be the first power to recognize Japan's full independence? Queen Liliuokalani was the first foreign power to recognize Japan's full independence on January 18, 1893. Yeah. That's one day right after January 17th, because they sent the notice before the 17th. It arrived in Tokyo under Ambassador Irwin, the Hawaiian ambassador, who notified the Japanese government that Hawaii will recognize Japan's full independence. And from that point on, Hawaiian subjects in trouble in Japan will be subjected to Japanese law. Because did you know we were actually imposing Hawaiian Kingdom law in Japan over Hawaiian subjects if they get in trouble. We're just like the British and the French. Kind of gives you an idea of where the Hawaiian Kingdom's at. So when the Permanent Court of Arbitration said that Great Britain and the United States recognized the Hawaiian Kingdom as an independent state, that meant is when the United States recognized Hawaiian independence, they're recognizing that Americans who are in Hawaii are subject to Hawaiian Kingdom law, not American law, like they would be in Japan at that time. And then when Great Britain recognized Hawaiian independence, British subjects were subject to Hawaiian law. They couldn't claim protection under British law. That's how important the term independence is, right? So when people say there's an independence movement, that's operating on a false premise that Hawaii is not an independent state that is trying to become one. That is nonsensical given our history. But it is sensible if you don't know our history.
So Keanu, so what would be the term to use then? Because I was guilty, I've been good this,
I wasn't putting my fingers now.
No, because I have mentioned this, for total independence.
Yeah.
So what would be the narrative?
Compliance with the law of occupation. Because remember, Alfred Desires, the UN independent expert,
Yeah.
he must comply with the Hague and Geneva Conventions. Now the thing about the independent expert, Dr. Desires, like I said, he didn't say anything new in February of 2018. He said what we've been saying since we got back since Perfect Idol days, 1990s. The power of what he said, though, is the position of which he said it from. It's called the United Nations. That's what's important. Like I said earlier, outside looking in, because that is a United Nations official looking at Hawaii and saying occupation. Yeah. Now, in 1893, did you know that there were only 44 independent states? Only 44. And Hawaii was one of them.
Yes.
By 1945, there were 46. And by today, there's 197. 193 are members of the United Nations. The others are not members of the UN. So like Serbia, Kosovo, Niue, Cook Islands. You don't have to be a member of the United Nations to be an independent state.
Yeah.
Switzerland was not a member of the United Nations until 2002. So everybody thinks you gotta be part of the UN. No, the UN is an organization of independent states. It is not all the independent states. That's what's important to know. And any resolution that is passed by the General Assembly only applies to those members. The only time it would apply to a non-member like Switzerland or Hawaii is if that resolution is referring to an international law. But the resolution itself has no effect on non-members of the United Nations. That's why they're called resolutions, unless they refer to an international law. Yes?
So Dr. Desai's letter is representative of the Security Council, the whole of the UN?
No, so, okay, so Dr. Desai is part of the mechanism that was set up by the Human Rights Council to monitor human rights violations. So Dr. Desai, in 2012, his position was made, and he was elected by the Human Rights Council, which is about 47 members of the General Assembly. The Human Rights Council is another agency of the United Nations. Okay. Now, when he was elected, and by the way, the United States was a member of the Human Rights Council when he was elected. Okay, that's important to know. Because the United States is not a member of the UN Human Rights Council right now. They pulled out. When he was elected as an independent expert. So at the international level, these people called independent experts are synonymous with special rapporteur. They're experts. So when they speak, it's not legally binding, but it has moral authority that represents the United Nations because of their position.
Their expertise.
That's the importance, right? Because it's ultimately up to countries to execute the law, not the UN. The UN is just an organization of independent states. But he does have, as other special rapporteurs and independent experts, moral authority that speaks to the issue. Yeah. Did I answer that question? Okay. So, that's the status of Hawaii. So Hawaii's a state under international law. What are those laws? So we need to understand. Well, what you have is Hawaii, states, called nation states, commonly referred to as nation states, are subject to international law. According to Professor Greenwood, a former judge of the International Court of Justice, traditional international law was based upon a rigid distinction between the state of peace and a state of war. Okay, so a state of peace and a state of war are part of international law. Countries were either in a state of peace, as Professor Crawford said, or they're in a state of war. There was no middle ground. Okay? So something has to trigger a state of war. Where the laws of peace don't apply, the laws of war apply. And the laws of war are the Hague and Geneva Conventions. You don't apply the Hague and Geneva Conventions during a time of peace. Right? Okay. So, this is also reflected in Professor Oppenheim. He's a very well-known jurist in international law that's cited all over the world. Volume 1, International Law, Peace. Volume 2, War and Neutrality. So when I was in the Army, we would be trained to use the laws of war when we go to war. But if we're not at war, let's say we're in South Korea, we don't use the Hague and Geneva Conventions. We probably would use the Status of Forces Agreement and the Uniform Code of Military Justice for infractions. But if there's a state of war, like in Iraq or Afghanistan, then the Hague and Geneva Conventions would apply. And that I could possibly commit a war crime by, let's say, killing a civilian, which was not supposed to be targeted, okay? So once in a state of war, Professor Greenwood says the law of peace ceased to apply between the two states, and the relations with one another became subject to the laws of war, while the relations with other states, not party to the conflict, became governed by neutrality. So it's like two guys are fighting down the road, and everybody who's not in the fight gotta back off and let them settle. Once they pop fight, they shake hands. Okay, now we can go back and, hey, how you doing? That's what this means, right? Now, Professor Venturini, he says, if an armed conflict occurs, the law of armed conflict, which is war, must be applied from the beginning until the end when the law of peace resumes in full effect. That's when you need a treaty of peace, right? Treaty of peace. Now, during war, what initiates war is an act of war, which is an act of hostility. It's not a legal determination, it's a fact. So that act of hostility, called an act of war, is what triggers state of war. So in 1941, December 7th, the Japanese attack on American military initiated state of war, right? War was fought, hostilities took place from 1941 to 1945 for 4 years, until a treaty of surrender was signed. The treaty of surrender did not transform the situation back to a state of peace. It just stopped hostilities. Then Japan was occupied from 1945 to 1952. General MacArthur was the military governor whose job was to administer the laws of the occupied state, Japanese law, not American law. Then in 1952, a treaty of peace that was signed the year before in San Francisco took effect, and that's when the occupation came to an end. So Japan went from a state of war in 1941 to a state of peace in 1952. A lot of people thought that war ended when they signed the Treaty of Surrender. The same thing would apply to Korea today. So what you hear on CNN is whether or not Kim Jong-un, Trump, and the South Korean Prime Minister are going to enter into a treaty of peace to end the war in Korea. But yet they're not shooting. All you have is an armistice that created the 38 parallel. It's still a state of war, right? We're in the same boat. That's what you're going to see. We're just like Korea without bullets flying.
Keanu, knowing all of this, what was the implications with the Hawaiian Kingdom when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor? You know, even though they were bombing the American military, but it was in Hawaii. What was the?
Well, it happened as a result of the occupation, which I want to get into. And if the United States wasn't here, we wouldn't have been attacked.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Now, the problem there, though, when civilians are involved, is you know those anti-aircraft rounds? Boom, boom, boom. What goes up gotta come down. You had civilian deaths outside of Pearl Harbor. Kagoki, Kapa'ulu. Yeah. Now, that's a violation of the laws of occupation, and the laws of war. Putting civilians in harm's way. Right now, we are all also in harm's way because Hawaii's targeted by North Korea. They're not targeting our beaches, they're targeting the military. It's just that the change from 1945 to now, back then, 1945 was conventional warfare. Now, nuclear, biological, chemical, NBC. Very different time, more devastation. So, President Cleveland, international law relies on heads of states who speak and who enter into agreements. President Cleveland represents the United States, so when he speaks, the United States speaks. And the international community is watching, right? So President Cleveland, after initiating an investigation in March of 1893 into the overthrow of the Hawaiian government on January 16th and 17th, he finished his investigation and he reported to Congress on December 18th, 1893, 11 months later. So this is what he said. Now keep in mind, the state of Hawaii Supreme Court says whatever its origins, the state of Hawaii is now the lawful government. Because you're going to start to see this whole thing further unravel, right? So President Cleveland tells Congress on the 16th day of January, 1893, between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, a detachment of Marines from the United States steamer Boston with 2 pieces of artillery landed at Honolulu. The men, upwards of 160 in all, were supplied with double cartridge belts filled with ammunition and with haversacks and canteens, and were accompanied by a hospital corps with stretchers and medical supplies. What do you think they're going to do?
Ready for bang bang?
They ready for bang bang? You got it? I mean, to even have hospital corps with stretchers, they're anticipating. Boom, boom. Well, whatever this is, what does President Cleveland say it is? See that? He's the determining factor. This military demonstration upon the soil of Honolulu was of itself an act of war. Trigger word. He just triggered from state of peace to state of war. An act of hostility by U.S. troops. This is what prompted the Queen to do a conditional surrender. Not a treaty of peace, a surrender. And she's going to use terms that reflect war. I, Lili Okalani, by the grace of God and under the Constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom, Queen, do hereby solemnly protest against any and all acts done against myself and the constitutional government of the Hawaiian Kingdom by certain persons claiming to have established a provisional or temporary government of and for this kingdom, that I yield to the superior force of the United States. Superior force. She's not yielding to the insurgents. That I yield to the superior force of the United States, whose ambassador, John Stevens, has caused United States troops to be landed at Honolulu and declared that he would support the provisional government. Now, to avoid any collision of armed forces and perhaps the loss of life, I do this under protest and impelled by said force, yield my authority until such time as the government of the United States shall, upon the facts being presented to it, under the action of its representatives, and reinstate me in the authority which I claim as a constitutional sovereign of the Hawaiian Islands. That's pretty much dead on. And they say that the person who drafted that conditional surrender was Paul Newman, the former Attorney General of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Now, by the way, he's Haole, but he's Hawaiian. Because the word Hawaiian is short for Hawaiian subject, right? We use Hawaiian wrong today. We think it's ethnic. Hawaiian is like British or American, right? So it's important to know that the Queen Lili Okalani had some good people around her, good advisors. And then President Cleveland makes this statement. This wrongful recognition by our minister placed the government of the Queen in a position of most perilous perplexity. On the one hand, she had the possession of the palace, of the barracks, and of the police station, and at her command at least 500 fully armed men and several pieces of artillery. You see the war terminology here, yeah? Indeed, the whole military force of her kingdom was on her side and at her disposal. In this state of things, if the Queen could have dealt with the insurgents alone, her course would have been plain and the result unmistakable. Insurgents. That's the origin of the state of Hawaii. Insurgency. That's the provisional government. Then Cleveland goes on to say, but the United States had allied itself with her enemies, had recognized them as the true government of Hawaii, and had put her, the Queen, and her adherents in the position of opposition against lawful authority. She knew that she could not withstand the power of the United States, but she believed that she might safely trust to its justice. That's what Cleveland was doing. That's why he did the investigation, and that's why he reported his conclusions to the Congress. So, we know that the origin of the provisional government, they're insurgents. That's not a government, right? Insurgency. But Cleveland actually addresses these individuals as to who is or what is the government. So he says here in the message, the government of the Queen was undisputed and was both the de facto and de jure government. Then he goes on to say who the provisional government was. When our minister recognized the provisional government, the only basis upon which it rested was the fact that the Committee of Safety had in the manner had above declared it to exist. It was neither a government de facto nor de jure. So, number one, they're insurgents. That's its origin. And they were not a government. So the question is, how did they become a government? Then President Cleveland finishes and concludes by an act of war with the participation of a diplomatic representative of the United States, and without authority of Congress, the government of a feeble but friendly and confiding people has been overthrown. So clearly, we're talking state of war stuff. That's what we're talking about. These admitted acts of war triggered a state of war under international law. And the only way you can transform it back to a state of peace is a treaty of peace. We don't have a treaty of peace. We're like Korea, still in a state of war. And that's why the UN officials said the state of Hawaii and the United States has to administer the laws of the occupied state in accordance with the Hague and Geneva Conventions, right? At first, when I was bringing up this history of Hawaii, people didn't believe me, so I had to get my PhD to prove it. I had to get law journal articles published, yeah? And then here's a guy from Geneva, a UN official. He's only saying what I've been saying, but what's good about it is he's outside of Hawaii. See, it's like my son, I tell him how to do something, he don't listen. But when his uncle tells him the same thing, he listens.
You do it. Yeah, outside of the territory.
You gotta be outside the family. Well, yeah, okay, I should do it. But what that UN official did was courageous. Yeah.
He put it out there.
And it just so happens he retired a few months later. And you know what? You can't change the memorandum. He's not there. And that is an official record. I actually had a Skype meeting with him in Geneva. Very cool guy, Dr. Desaias. So, what kind of war are we in? Because obviously we're not shooting each other.
Religion.
Well, not a religion war, because there's a lot of shooting. The way it's now, Muslims and Christians, you get the zealots on both sides. But, did you know that most deaths actually derive from religious wars? Yeah. So, is it a legal war or is it an illegal war?
Illegal.
So, Lauderpack says, an illegal war is a war of aggression undertaken by one belligerent side in violation of a basic international obligation prohibiting recourse to war as an instrument of national policy. So it's an unjust war that we have here. And the whole point of the US invasion in 1893 was not about sugar, the sugar plantations, it was all about Pearl Harbor and securing Hawaii as a military installation. That was the main reason, right? We've been led to believe this false narrative of sugar. No, that's wrong. Those were insurgents making up the story, trying to justify it and cover the truth. Now, at the Nuremberg trial, after World War II, prosecuting Nazis for war crimes, the court said, whatever may be the cause of a war that has broken out, and whether or not the cause be a so-called just cause, the same rules of international law are valid as to what must not be done and what may be done. And that's the Hague and Geneva Conventions today. Article 43 of the Hague Convention speaks to that requirement to administer the laws of the occupied state, which is what Desaias was making reference to in the Hague and Geneva Conventions. Article 43 of the Hague Convention does not confer on the occupying power any sovereignty over the territory. The occupant may therefore not extend its own legislation over the occupied territory, nor act as a sovereign legislator. But that's exactly what they did since 1898. So the fact that it was done does not make it legal. And the only way that you can keep any question of its legality out of the picture is to ensure people don't know about this history. That's how you get people to not know, is not make them aware. Right? And obviously we were all not aware until recently. And the expression, quote, laws enforced in the country in Article 43 refers not only to laws in the strict sense of the word, but also to the Constitution, decrees, ordinances, court precedents, as well as administrative regulations and executive orders. It's the entire legal system. It also includes the Maile. It includes native tenant rights. It includes gathering rights. It includes all the laws. Yeah? It's not just the statutes. And here is the indictment of Nazis after World War II, Nuremberg. Count 3, war crimes, Germanization of occupied territories. In certain occupied territories purportedly annexed to Germany, does that sound familiar? Purportedly annexed in 1898. The defendants, or Nazis, methodically and pursuant to plan, endeavored to assimilate those territories politically, culturally, socially, and economically into the German Reich. The defendants endeavored to obliterate the former national character of these territories. What does that mean? It's called brainwashing. These Germans were actually in areas such as Luxembourg that was occupied, and they took over the public schools, and they began to brainwash the children into believing they're German. And they were teaching them how to, you gotta speak German, right? Well, that's what happened in Hawaii. 1906 started a program for patriotic exercises in the public schools, which was to Americanize the children. This is my tutu's generation. My tutu was born in 1910. By the time my tutu finished school, the national consciousness of the Hawaiian Kingdom was nearly obliterated. Yet her parents was born in 1880s. By the time it got to my father's generation, when he went to St. Louis, it's already institutionalized. He didn't know anything. And by the time it got to me at Kamehameha schools, out of sight, out of mind. I didn't know anything at all. You know? So in 3 generations, the national character of the Hawaiian Kingdom was nearly obliterated. Right now we are recovering that. Right? Okay. So, law of land warfare, FM 27-10. That's what the U.S. Army uses in Iraq and Afghanistan. It says here, qualifications of members of militias and volunteer corps. This actually defines under international law what the state of Hawaii is. So the provisional government was an armed force. It's a militia. Carried out by the United States. It's a puppet. Changed its name to the Republic, to the territory, to the state. Can you see how problematic this origin of the state of Hawaii is? Not just problematic, unlawful. And then chapter 8 talks about remedies for violation of international law. You know, one of the remedies, what it starts with, when you find out you're occupied, rights are violated, you got war crime victims, you obviously are not in control, right? Otherwise you will not be victims. Or we would not be victims. Well, they say here, in the event of violation of the law of war, the injured party may legally resort to remedial action in the following steps. Publication of the facts with the view to influencing public opinion against the offending belligerent. It's called exposure. That's the key. Start talking. That's the first step. Don't attack, just talk. Set the record straight. Get the right history, use the right terms. Yeah? If you don't know, don't say anything, because you only add confusion. Right? This is not a time when you try to get people to believe you. No, this is a time to understand a situation that is could become quite volatile, right? And the one thing you don't want to encourage or incite is violence. Right now it's exposure and education. I'm not one to solicit any membership. I only teach. I just expose. You get graded, take my class. Then you get educated. It's very difficult to fail my class. but I had to fill a few people, because I'm thinking, geez, how many times I give you chances to go do your assignment?
Come on, Rob.
Now also, war crimes in FM 27-10. So the term war crime is the technical expression for a violation of the law of war by any person or persons, whether military or civilian. That's important, right? Every violation of the law of war is a war crime. So war crimes are not open-ended, it's specific. Destruction of property, unlawful confinement, unfair trial. Those are war crimes, and they're defined in the Geneva Conventions and the Hague Conventions. And then we have conspiracy and complicity. Conspiracy as well as complicity in the commission of war crimes are punishable. In Dr. DeZayas' the UN official's letter to the state of Hawaii judiciary, it said, plundering. The courts cannot continue to plunder private property. Plundering is a word for pillaging. Now remember collude, yeah, and enable? It's called complicity, conspiracy. So he was making reference to war crimes without stating the war crime in his letter.
Keanu,
Yes,
so is complicity, could voting
yes.
or running for office be
Yes.
considered complicity?
So the violation, the law of war, the provision, the war crime under the Hague Convention number 43 is you must administer the laws of the occupied state. Now, if you violate that provision, that's a war crime, meaning you legislate with American law. That's the war crime. So legislators are committing war crimes, whether at the congressional level, who are from Hawaii, state level, or county council. Now, you can be complicit in that war crime if you voted for that person.
Yeah.
See, that's not, you didn't commit the crime, but you're complicit in the commission of a crime. You see how kind of sticky this is gonna get?
Yeah, so that brings up a lot of Kanaka that's why they don't choose to get into
Vote.
you have to vote, or,
Yeah.
because they truly believe in what you're stating.
Well, not believe, it's just the law.
Yeah.
Because if they continue, they will be just
The
as much in
treasonous.
trouble
Yes.
as anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Association.
Yeah.
that-
Well,
you get it.
that's why Jennifer Ruggles, the councilwoman, had to do what she did. She had no
Yeah,
choice.
she had to stand up for what is, for this right and just.
Well, isn't that what, Kamana Opono Crab did in, 20,
When he asked
13,
State
yeah.
Department. Well, he was just inquiring as a matter of crisis management. He didn't become a whistleblower. Jennifer Ruggles did.
well, would that be, he didn't become a whistleblower because his trustees, retracted the letter in itself, then making it a moot inquiry?
Well, I mean, that whole process was ridiculous to begin with, because Kamano sent the letter to Kerry.
Right,
A third party cannot rescind a letter. The only person that can rescind the letter is the one who sent it. Now, they can say, don't consider the letter, but don't say we rescind the letter. I mean, that is just grammatically incorrect to begin with. But that, I think, is a test as to how tense this thing can get. Now, that's before Dr. DeZayas came out with his memorandum for the UN. You know, prior to that, people just thought, that's Keanu's opinion. And that's Keanu's view. That's another view. That's not a view, it's just, this is water. Stop calling it Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And I don't care how many of you guys believe it's Coca-Cola, it's still water.
Yeah.
Now, if you force this down my throat, and I don't want it, you know, I just became a victim. Now you're a perpetrator. And there's no race, color, creed on that. So that's where this is at. And that's why Jennifer Ruggles did what she did, because she knew that if she continued to legislate, she would incur criminal liability. She had to stop. And then when Corporation Counsel could not refute what she said through her attorney, she became a whistleblower. She says state of Hawaii committing violations of the Hague and Geneva Conventions. I need to step up. So Jennifer is the only person that I've seen that broke ranks.
Yeah.
And she's doing what she's supposed to do because the Geneva Convention that was ratified by the United States, the Geneva specifically, they're addressing, in the Geneva Convention, they're addressing the violations of civilians that took place in World War II. That was the Geneva Convention of 1949. They made that Geneva Convention number 4 to protect civilians. And they took into consideration what Germany and Italy and Japan was doing. So they said that even if, there's a provision in the treaty, it says even if the occupying power annexes the territory, it says annexes the territory, the Geneva Convention still applies. And then they further state in a commentary, by stating annexation, they're not saying it's legal, but they're saying it's a fact. If they take it, it still applies, because that's exactly what Germany did to Luxembourg in World War II. They unilaterally annexed it.
Yeah.
Purported annexations. Then also in the provision of the Geneva Convention, which the US ratified, it said that if any other country is aware that one of the parties to the convention is not following it, they all gotta make sure they follow. And then one more important provision of the Geneva Convention, it says that agents of the United States must ensure respect is given and compliance given to the Geneva Convention. Yeah. That means Jennifer, who swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United
She's
States.
doing the right thing.
It includes treaties, that's Article 6, Supremacy Clause, Geneva Convention. So now, by her being a whistleblower, she's doing it according to the rules, the Geneva Convention. And now it's her job to protect protected persons. And you're gonna start to see things happening from this Monday. Yeah, she's really doing some really good stuff.
Is there any legal foundation to the idea that of like voting under duress?
No.
That some people feel that, no.
No, because the legislation leads to war crimes. And you can justify all you want, sell it to a jury when you get prosecuted. So people will do what they gotta do, but it's illegal. That is not in compliance with the law of occupation, because during occupation, there are no elections. Because that's not the government there. You can't have elections. No. So you can't vote under duress.
Yep.
So complicity, so you gotta be careful.
Keanu, so what about like for, Fitzgerald Kalani, I know they went, you know, he went into Congress.
Yeah, well, actually, what they were doing was trying to protect Hawaii, because Hawaii is a territorial holding. The president appointed the governors. The first governor here in the territory was Sanford Dole.
Yep.
And they were taking down Native Hawaiians, removing them from their lands.
Yep.
That's why Kurio, his main focus was trying to get the feds to come up with some federal law to hold the territory in check. That's Hawaiian homes.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying he didn't commit war crimes. I'm just saying there's a reason why people did what they did. Yeah. So I look at that as being justified, because you're dealing with an entity that if they didn't do anything, we wouldn't be around too long. Yeah. It's an existential threat.
Sorry, so I guess, I mean, like even if you're gonna consider or you actually vote, you could actually run under the same premises of, yeah, I'm gonna uphold United States law to its full extent, not to the extent that the fake state is trying to impose on us.
Well, it's not maintaining American law, because we're not in America.
Well, when you become elected, you have to take an oath.
Yeah, but see, there's an Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the US Constitution called the Supremacy Clause. So it basically says the laws of the United States, federal level, and treaties are the supreme law of the land, and that every judge and state is bound thereby. That's the Supremacy Clause, right? Well, right off the bat, Jennifer realized that she is operating under the Statehood Act, which created her position as a council member. That's an American law. That's illegal. But in that same oath of allegiance to support the Constitution, it includes treaties, right? One of those treaties, two of them, is the Hague and Geneva Conventions that apply in occupied territory. She now has to follow the international law, not American law.
And that's above.
And under the Hague and Geneva Conventions, there are no elections. It's called protecting protected persons. Yeah, so she's realizing that she can help the people without legislating. That's what she's doing.
So that would be the same case for, like, for myself and Tita Kukana watching, we sit on the Y9 neighborhood board. Kukana sits on the Y Manalo neighborhood board, so, you know, she watching right now down there, it's like crap, you know, so she just said, so what do we do? Just sit back and watch until the wrong is made right?
No? Well, the thing is, you gotta know what to do. So what's happening is, there's a Me Too movement going on. And you know the Me Too movement?
Protected person movement.
Exactly. So the Me Too movement is, if Jennifer Ruggles is saying, my job is to protect protected persons under the Geneva Convention, where's all the protected persons?
That's like what Kalani Campbell, they don't do anything.
I don't think it was Kalani, I think it was other people. I don't think Kalani was part of the testimony.
No, DP, Calvi Kane,
Yeah,
all of them.
yeah. Now, they stood up and they basically told the county council, I'm a protected person.
Right.
And I demand protection, and I demand that this entity cease and desist. Because you're not supposed to be doing this. Right now, the Me Too movement is protected persons gotta show who they are.
Can you define protected persons?
Okay, so under
People watching.
the Geneva Convention, Article 4 of the Geneva Convention defines protected persons. So protected persons is a title that you have over a civilian in occupied territory. Now, under the Geneva Convention, Article 4, it was at first limited to all citizens of foreign countries, including the occupied state, in the territory, but it did not include the citizens of the occupier. Okay, you guys hear that? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But in 1999, it was expanded. And this came out of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. And basically what happened there was this guy Tadic. He was one of Milosevic's henchmen. And they were trying to stop the breakup of Yugoslavia. And the area that we know today as Bosnia-Herzegovina, that was actually a breakaway entity. And Tadic was committing war crimes against Bosnian Serbs in that territory. Genocide, murder. He was arrested in, I believe, 1994 in Germany and extradited to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. He went on trial 1997, and they came out, the judge in the trial said he has to acquit Tadic of about 11 indictments for war crimes committed against Bosnian Serbs. Because he says, according to the Geneva Convention, they had the same nationality, same citizenship. They were all Yugoslavian. This is before they successfully broke up, right? It's an internal armed conflict. It went on appeal in 1999, and the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia Appeals Chamber reversed the decision and said the formality of nationality tied to the occupier of territory is too stringent. It has to apply to the territory of where that protected person is in. And because that was a breakaway entity, those Bosnian Serbs held allegiance to the breakaway Bosnian Herzegovina. So he said the issue then is allegiance, not nationality. Then they reversed it, and then he was convicted of 11 counts of war crimes. Because you can't commit a war crime against a protected person, or against a person who is not a protected person. So what happened there is international criminal law has expanded the definition of a protected person, so it now includes American citizens in occupied territory, because they owe allegiance to the Hawaiian Kingdom.
To the Hawaiian Kingdom here on our territory.
Because they're in the territory.
Unoccupied state, yeah.
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 So it's the victims and the victimizers that are covered?
Well, the question is who are protected persons and well, you can be victimized, but that doesn't mean you're a protected person that has been victimized. But right now, Americans are considered protected persons. Now, protected persons who took an oath of allegiance to the United States are not protected persons. That is an affirmative statement of oath. The International Criminal Tribunal is not referring to an affirmative position of allegiance, like you gotta sign something. Because those Bosnian Serbs who were wiped out didn't sign an oath of allegiance to the breakaway group. It's actually a matter of law. So under Hawaiian Kingdom law in the Penal Code, Chapter 6, it says allegiance is, everyone, an alien within Hawaii owes allegiance to this kingdom, even if his country be at war or at peace with the kingdom.
So that's 1864 Constitution or?
Yeah. No, that's the Penal Code.
Penal Code.
Yeah, that's the Criminal Code.
Okay.
Chapter 6.
So Article 4 of the Geneva Convention, that's what we need to state as a protected person.
So for Hawaiian subjects who aren't Americans, or I'm a British subject or a French citizen, would cite Article 4 of the Geneva Convention. If I'm an American and I didn't sign an oath of allegiance to the United States government, then I cite my protected person status from the Tadic case of 1999, International Criminal Law.
So would you suggest we join the Me Too movement?
Yes. No, I'm not, no, all I'm saying is,
Okay.
no, there are, okay, you need to make a record of who's a protected person.
Okay.
Now, what you're doing is by doing that, okay, so what those people did with the county council, that can happen in any legislative body, any administrative body, neighborhood board, planning, housing.
Zoning board or commissions.
Yeah, planning commission, water rights commission. This is all part of administrative aspects. That's illegal. Even though it's not a statute, it violates Article 43. So there's a way to follow their lead of what they did.
It's a good template, no?
There you go. Yeah, I mean, those guys did it well.
Even going down to the Capitol and in the chambers and.
I'm not saying, no, I'm not saying what you gotta do, I'm just saying follow the lead of others who already did it. But I can tell you Jennifer Ruggles knows what she's talking about.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So the other Me Too movement is not just protected persons. It's actually whistleblowers.
So
Me
it's
Too.
creating awareness.
I'm a whistleblower.
Yeah, it's creating awareness.
In fact, I met with a person from the Democratic Party, and we went over this stuff. And when she saw that, she realized that she was complicit in the Democratic Party involved with the caucus and trying to get legislation passed. That's complicit. She now realizes it's illegal. And she says, I gotta be a whistleblower. I said, yeah. So now you gotta talk to people there, or they gotta start breaking ranks. Basically follow the lead of Jennifer. Yeah.
What about us peons? We don't belong to anything like that. We're not in government. I mean, I'm a Hawaiian, born and raised here.
Well, no, I guarantee you're not a peon. If anything, protected persons' rights are being protected, even when protected persons don't even know they're protected persons.
You know, some feel quite from.
So that's, so, I have to say that kind of fast with that. No, and that wasn't planned, you know. But this is where people in positions of authority are now taking the appropriate steps to protect protected persons, which includes people like you and anybody else, and even Auntie down the road who don't even know what's going on. So advocating for the rights of protected persons to have free healthcare at Queens Hospital, because that is a Hawaiian Kingdom institution.
Yeah.
That's free.
It's free. Yeah, but
It
it's
is.
illegal. Yeah.
So what's gonna happen is, Jennifer Ruggles is advocating for protected persons who are Aboriginal Hawaiians for free healthcare, and if they don't provide free healthcare, those are war crimes.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are coming out. Also, issues dealing with the foreclosures. Jennifer Ruggles is addressing that with the judges. They gotta stop the foreclosures because people that are going through foreclosures have title insurance to cover their loan, because this whole system is illegal. So there are approaches that are being done to protect people who may not even feel that they're being protected yet, but they're gonna reap the benefits from it. Also the IRS. They shouldn't be taxing people in Hawaii. It can't tax protected persons because IRS taxes are limited to US territory.
Exactly.
It's an American thing.
Yeah.
But if they
So
do
stop
tax
paying-
Americans, they can tax Americans
I
abroad,
don't.
but not people within the occupied territory.
Yeah.
So you have all these things that are now starting to come out, right? So it's an exciting time where people are actually taking responsibility, but people are getting scared too.
What happens if you work for a federal, if you have a federal job?
Just you didn't take an oath of allegiance, so.
No, some people do though, like if you're an air traffic controller, you take a oath of allegiance.
Well, there's things called necessity, you gotta
Okay,
maintain
okay.
planes don't collide. If you're a police officer, you gotta protect the public, you know.
Yeah.
So this is not like everybody gonna fall apart. But what it is, it's gonna force a situation where this has to be remedied. And there's a way to fix the problem. But before you can fix the problem, you gotta start heating up the pot.
I know we're running late, but, sorry. Travel. So if we only have that American passport,
Let's play the game. See, like for me, I have an American passport. Because I'm actually American. Yeah, I'm an American. My great-grandfather came from Tennessee. Where do you think Reeves came from? Reeves is not from Gaul. From Sparta, Tennessee.
Dual citizen?
Yeah, so the way nationality works from being jus sanguinis, which is from parentage, or natural born, right, or naturalized. I'm not an American because I was born in Hawaii. I'm an American because my great-grandfather came from Tennessee. So as an American, I can use American passport. I'm not saying, because I'm also a Hawaiian subject.
Yeah.
When I was in The Hague in the World Court, you had people up there with 6 passports.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how
Take
it
all the
works.
passports.
No, because it's all based on parentage.
Yeah.
But see, in America, you don't learn that. You think that you only can be one. Nah, you gotta get educated on that stuff. Now, also with the case of American passports, that issue came up with the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Because we're going up there for hearings in December of 2000. So we asked them, how do we travel to Holland with American passports? Because we're with the Hawaiian Kingdom. And she said, bring 2 passports. Hawaiian Kingdom passport, the American passport, because Hawaii's occupied. Show both when you enter Schiphol with the customs. There's a way to address this, and I'm not advocating chaos, but I'm just saying Me Too movement, who's a protected person, who's a whistleblower. See, then I know who's who and what's what. Right now, I don't know any of you here on where you stand. But I do know where you stand as far as you listening to this or you're getting information. But I'm not here rallying the troops.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if you an FBI agent setting me up. I'm serious. I don't know if you an undercover agent for somebody. I gotta make sure I talk straight.
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna put words in my mouth. Because I already had a few times people trying to do that. Right? So,
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I usually am, but I was told or made to believe that, like, in certain cases, like you fight in the IRS, and unless they were aware of the status of the Hawaiian citizens, you didn't have much what would you call it?
recourse.
Yeah. How would that work? I mean, they all know now, they must know.
Okay, well,
It's getting there.
well, as far as the federal government, when is that point that federal government employees cannot claim they didn't know, right? For federal government, my position is Cleveland's message in 1893, December 18, to the US Congress. The entire federal system is in check. That's when the notice began. Now, as far as people in Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, I can say that that awareness actually probably began 1993 Apology Resolution.
Yeah.
Because it said in there, by an act of war, the government of a friendly people was overthrown. It actually had that in there. Whether or not people understood it, well, that's irrelevant. But I still like to take it to the point where is that level of consciousness or awareness that I can measure? Like for Jennifer Ruggles, I knew she knew when we talked. And that's why I recommended this is what you should do to protect yourself, right? So that's really what's happening here. It's not trying to change everything one time, one step at a time.
What is the remedy?
Okay, you know what, let's just go, can I stop now, and since, because we're kind of going off, because I might be going back to stuff we already covered in some of the slides. Okay. Okay, and you know what? I don't need to write anything. Okay, so what is the remedy? Okay, so right off the bat, what does the law say first? Not what is the remedy, but what does the law say, international law says? We discovered it.
No country can occupy another country without a treaty of annexation.
No, that's just situational, but what does the law say with regard to occupation?
The
Oh, there's,
They have to.
occupier has to administer the laws of the occupied state,
Exactly.
occupied territory.
Just like what Desire said. So they have to comply with the Hague and Geneva Conventions. Because right now we have over 100 years of non-compliance,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
25 years.
Now, the Hague and Geneva Conventions are actually codified customary law, which means it's the same law that existed before 1949 and before 1907. Okay, it's already recognized as custom. So it applied in 1893. Now, so that's the first step, compliance. So the next step is, well, what does the law say beyond that? So who administers the laws of the occupied state? Article 42 of the Hague Convention, which precedes Article 43, says occupation is considered, territory is considered occupied when it is under the effective control of the occupying force. So the effectiveness, because you cannot administer laws without having effectiveness, right?
Yeah, having influence.
You need to enforce the law. That's why effectiveness is crucial to administering law. That's why Article 42 is there.
Yeah.
So who is in effective control right now in Hawaii?
The state of Hawaii.
Yeah, not the feds,
Yeah, state of Hawaii.
state, right? If anything, the feds are in control of the military bases, not across Hawaii. So then, the state of Hawaii is in effective control. Now, under Article 2 of the Hague Regulations, it says that the Hague Conventions also apply to armed forces, not governments. Is the state of Hawaii an armed force?
Oh,
Yeah, it is.
oh, it is. Oh, it
It's
is.
not a government. Remember, whatever its origins,
Eh,
well, that's irrelevant, what the Supreme Court said. So the state of Hawaii as an entity has a centralized commander, which is the governor, and everything falls under that. There's a constitution. It's like constitution and bylaws for this armed force. So they're in effective control. So the next step would be, how do you get the state of Hawaii as an armed force to actually begin to administer the laws of the occupied state? They have to be transformed from an armed force to a government. So how can they become
a government.
a government? Well, Field Manual 27-5 covers that, which says armed forces can become military governments if they are in effective control of territory. Right now, the state of Hawaii is not a government yet. That's why these violations are happening. They have to be transformed into a military government. So the next step, how does the state of Hawaii become a military government?
You're talking like martial law kind of thing?
Exactly, exactly, because in 1941, December 8th,
In Japan.
Well,
martial law, Governor Poindexter had to get permission from the president to declare martial law because he was appointed by the president. He then designated General Smart to step in as the military governor. All legislative bodies ceased to continue or ceased to operate, and it all came under martial law under the general. Now, martial law is a military government within the territory of a particular country. Military government is martial law outside of the territory. But it operates the same way, right? So you would say martial law in Louisiana, you would say military government in Iraq, with the US, or military government in Japan with MacArthur, right? So then, how then does the state of Hawaii become a military government? Well, since 1959, the governor is no longer appointed by the president, so the governor does not need to get permission from the president to declare martial law, like Governor Poindexter had to. The governor, according to the according to the state of Hawaii Constitution, can declare martial law on his own based upon the situation, and then have himself replaced by a military governor, which would in this case would be General Logan. That's right, the adjutant general. And General Logan, I don't know. General Logan, I know it's a field artillery. He used to be a field artillery also.
That's why I thought he actually stated that he was part Kanaka.
But even if he wasn't, he's in a position that would be there. Now, General Logan, as a two-star general, had already gone through war college. They learn occupation. That's part of the training, right? So everything is there. It's just people are not aware. That's what it is. Now, about 2 years ago, did you know I had 3 meetings with Mike McCartney, Chief of Staff of Governor Ige, and I basically explained all of this to him. This is how you fix the problem. He got bad advice. Bad advice because he was probably told, this is some sovereignty thing. Excuse me, I got a PhD in the area. I kind of know this stuff. I was in The Hague, but they use that excuse. Well, now how does he explain what happened to Jennifer Ruggles right now? Because right now, breaking in ranks. And Mike McCartney, he knew. It's called awareness. There's a lot of things that happened since then.
So you're gonna be the first one coming down when we get the huli.
What is that?
When the huli comes, you're gonna be the first one.
First one for what?
Put him on blast.
No. So it's up to a prosecutor of the crown. That's not up to me.
So say if all of this education is in the consciousness of, say, Andrea Tupola, who is a Kanaka Maile, who is attempting to be governor, and she has the authority as the governor to kick this off, she could.
Yeah.
Right now, whoever's in that position now, no matter who it is, gotta do it.
Oh, gotta do it.
So it's like, when should they do it? Yesterday.
Yeah.
This is not wait till somebody gets into the office.
Sure.
Because then when people get into the office, then you got a lot of complicity because people voted for, so it gets sticky. It's getting very sticky. So this is not trying to justify it. This is just explaining. Now what Jennifer Ruggles is doing is what every legislator is supposed to be doing, protecting protected persons, not legislating. That's how it's supposed to work. Now, there's also the idea of the laws. Well, the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom is from 1893. They're kind of old. Yeah? What about everything today? Well, there's actually a proclamation that was already issued by what is called the Council of Regency, who represented the Hawaiian Kingdom in The Hague. So that's a real government that was up there, right? Under the laws of occupation, the rules, the occupied states government, like a government in exile, can legislate provisionally. That's what they did during World War II. You don't need elections. They can do it by the executive through proclamations. 2014, a proclamation was done, basically saying that all laws illegally imposed in Hawaii since then till now will be the provisional laws of the occupied state, so long as these laws do not run contrary to the letter, spirit, and intent of Hawaiian Kingdom law back then. So all of a sudden, driver's licenses, everything is all brought up to par. This was actually part of my doctoral dissertation. This was part of how you right the wrong. But you got to use the mechanisms that are there in this system that internationally they recognize, not necessarily that we recognize. That's why when people were doing the Me Too movement here, hashtag protected persons Hawaii, did you know when they were giving the testimony, county council, the audience was not the council. The audience was Amnesty International, Human Rights Council, International Committee of the Red Cross. That was the audience. But the record video, that's what's speaking, because that thing is going viral. But that has to continue until this thing can be fixed. So there is a way to fix the problem. There's a way to fix the problem. And everybody would love not paying American taxes, just pay Hawaiian taxes, state of Hawaii taxes, and you keep more money in your pocket.
So that proclamation that was made, it's in existing, it's law now.
Yeah, so it has to be carried out by the military government. Right now, it's just a proclamation.
Yeah.
Because whoever's in effective control has to carry it out.
Carry it out, as executed.
Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. So just like when governments in exile were making proclamations, they weren't being carried out by the German government. Well, that's what led to the crimes. If it was carried out, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the key in all of this and what I'm involved with is, I'm into fixing the problem, not into exacerbating the problem, right? But the underlying problem with fixing a problem is people don't know
Yeah, the
we even
education.
have a problem
The education.
and what rules even apply to fix the problem.
Yeah, yeah.
It's education.
Education awareness.
Education and awareness is key. And that's why political science was so important, because these are the terms that are used that explain this particular situation that applies not only here, the rules also apply in other countries that have been under occupations, you know. So, yeah, I'm very hopeful.
Yes.
Very hopeful.
100%.
He hasn't asked him.
How does this, the convention that was held, and they're writing up a constitution, how was-
1978?
Yeah, no,
Convention.
recently, last.
Not Eokwini.
Nice. I mean, all of that is, to say bluntly, it's rubbish.
It's rubbish.
No, because it's American law.
No, it isn't.
No, that was
Isn't
from the
that-
Sovereignty Election Council. That was from the roll.
Okay,
Legislature passed it.
okay,
It's American law.
It's a state initiative,
Yeah, it's a state initiative.
state
It's the roll.
endorsed,
Yeah,
funded,
yeah.
so it's.
Through OHA. Yeah.
It's the occupier's law.
Yeah, it's all American law.
Yeah.
that's Kavanaugh's fault, you
What?
Kavanaugh, Judge.
Oh, he's talking about it.
know, the guy who's up in objection, because he went against the,
Talking about
No,
Judge
no, but see,
Kavanaugh.
all the Native Hawaiian entitlements, all American law. It's illegal.
Yeah.
Mm.
See, so we can't pick it. This is not a racial issue. It's not
Yeah.
Kanaka or non-Kanaka. It's called victims. It's called civilians.
This law, yeah.
That's what it is. You know, so that's what applies during the law of occupation. And that's what's important. So anything that is tied to an American law, which is everything, is illegal. Now, how do we make that legal? That's that proclamation I was talking about. Because that's in line with the laws of occupation, but you gotta declare it and have it take effect.
so under that, then the governor appoints, and you have a military dictatorship, basically.
No, not a dictatorship.
Martial law.
Now people know what the law
Well,
is, you
martial
hold them
law is
accountable.
pretty close to dictatorship.
No, let's correct this. Now, General Smart messed up and abused martial law at that time, which the US Supreme Court ruled it was unlawful in what they did under the US Constitution, right? Okay, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about military martial law of what the law says you're supposed to do.
Okay, and what is the law?
Administer the laws of the occupied state.
And what
The
is
kingdom.
that law?
And that's my whole point, learn Hawaiian Kingdom law. We're going right back to square one. What is Hawaiian, does anybody know the civil code?
HRS.
Does anybody know the penal code? Does anybody know provisions of the Hawaiian Constitution? No. So
It's all
that's
on
the,
website, Alco.
that's
It's
the
all on
first,
website, yeah.
the laws of occupation is to administer the laws of the occupied state.
Yeah.
That's what the Hague and Geneva Conventions apply. The Hague and Geneva Conventions does not bring in new law. It enforces the law already there and to ensure accountability and protection of civilians, which were not protected during World War II. That's what prompted the 1949 Geneva Conventions.
Yeah.
Okay, so the key here is, when we say administration of Hawaiian Kingdom law, what everyone should be thinking about is, what is Hawaiian Kingdom law?
Yeah.
Now, that's the good question. What is Hawaiian Kingdom law? It's the civil code. It's the penal code. It's the session laws. It's the Maile. It's the subsidies of the Hawaiian government to Queen's Hospital. It's in entirety. So you start off by knowing what these laws are. The first step is, I would suggest go to hawaiiankingdom.org.
Right here.
hawaiiankingdom.org. You see Constitution and laws. It'll take you to the Constitution, Civil Code, it goes criminal code, the session laws.
The the 1884, 1886 laws.
Now, state of Hawaii Vice statutes can become Hawaiian Kingdom law, but it's not Hawaiian Kingdom law yet until they declare the proclamation, enforce the proclamation. So then, up to that, at that point, pretty much most of the laws that you guys have today are going to be provisional Hawaiian Kingdom laws. But they're not yet, because these are American laws being imposed here. You see what I'm saying?
So would this be considered like a state of interregnum?
No. No. It's in a state of confusion.
You got me.
We don't live in the state of Hawaii, we live in the state of confusion.
So Keanu, what Hawaii constitution should we go back to? The last one?
Okay, you know what? Before you folks try to know what the law is, I would highly recommend that you purchase my book, not from me, from the publisher, called Ua Mau Ke'ea. Okay, that's my doctoral dissertation, watered down for human consumption. Okay, so you know it's a history book now, and it's being used at Kamehameha schools as the new history book up at Kapalama. Take that and read that, because that it gives you the bigger picture, and it has a glossary. It explains the evolution of Hawaiian constitutional law. Because if you just go to read the civil code, you won't understand the context of it, right? Like especially certain laws that talk about, you know, monarchy, exchequer. That's actually treasury. Those are the terms that are used, right?
Yeah.
So I would recommend the first step is everybody go buy the book from Pu'a Foundation and start reading, and take sections of the book as you read and talk amongst family
Yeah,
members.
study group.
This kuka, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's almost like Bible studies.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I'm not saying my book is the Bible, I'm just saying take time to read it and talk. Because what we have to do is we have to begin to normalize this understanding and not politicize it.
That's
Your
consciousness.
book is actually really easy to read.
Yeah, easy.
You know the one thing I get from my students, they tell me that the hardest thing about the book is the Hawaiian names.
Yeah.
Because you read it, wait. So I told my students, okay, when it says Keawe Ahiulu, or if it says Keawe Mauhili, just say Joe.
Mark.
Or Mark, or Keawe, or Bully, or Bully. You know, once you get over the names, then you can read the story, because there's so much depth in our history, and that is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
But it covers the legal and political history of Hawaii from the 18th century till today. To me, I think that is foundational, that we need to have before we venture into understanding what are the specifics of the civil code, the criminal code, Hawaiian Kingdom case law, Supreme Court cases. What is a monarch? You know, what is a denizen? You know, that's another term. You're going to hear terms in the Hawaiian Kingdom statutes: Hawaiian denizen, Hawaiian subjects. Yeah, Hawaiian denizen is actually dual citizen. Hawaiian subject is not. So we need to know those terms. Also, we got to stop using the term indigeneity, colonization, right? And a lot of times, people misconstrue things, and it becomes a talking point that is wrong. I remember there's a movement now about this allodial thing, right? You guys heard about that? Allodial title?
Titles.
Okay. I was talking to one of the uncles in Wamanalo, and he was trying to tell me that. I said, no, uncle, that's wrong. No,
Okay, explain it to us.
Huh?
Explain it to us, please. I'm really interested.
What is it?
What is, like,
Okay, so allodial title. You know what? I gotta draw. Can somebody turn on the lights?
Yeah.
He's asking to turn off the.
Press it again.
Okay. Okay, my background is actually prior to Hawaiian Kingdom law, it's actually land titles. So I used to train land title abstractors at perfect title. Okay?
Right.
So that's my original area of Hawaiian Kingdom law.
That's when you came to the forefront.
Exactly. That's when I became the target.
Yeah.
Okay, so this word allodial, okay? Allodial
We're listening.
okay. This word allodial is from the feudal system in Middle Ages. So allodial is basically also called allodium, that the monarch had, the sovereign. And out of the monarch, he gave fiefs or fees, which later came to be known as fee simple, right? And everything stemmed from that person, which means what you got as a fief was not your own. It still belonged to the allodial holder. Okay?
Like a bungee cord.
Exactly, right. That's the feudal system. That's Middle Ages, right? Now, that term, who would have that type of ownership in Hawaii?
Hawaii.
Which king?
Kamehameha.
Remember the first.
Okay.
The first had it. Everything was
He was
beholden
under
to
Britain,
it.
that's right.
No. Okay, this
Because he was
idea
the first
of,
that united.
okay, this allodial system,
He was a British hero.
this allodial system stems from the feudal system.
Alii.
Okay, now, the Hawaiian version of feudal is just what you just said.
Alii Ana.
Yes. Alii Ana.
Hierarchy of Alii.
It's called chiefing. Okay? It's a hierarchy, right? Okay, so there are similarities, but you get this out of the principles of the Land Commission, right? It explains it. Now, what they did, what Kamehameha III did, was he placed, how do I say? He had to set up a system where people can have fee simple ownership, not beholden of a lord above them, right? Fee simple, okay. So they had to come up with a word for fee simple. They had to Hawaiianize the word. So the word that they used for fee simple is alodial. That's a Hawaiianization of an English word. Yeah, not of allodial. It's actually alodial. You see it in the royal patents in the native language called Palapala Silanui, which is Kuleana Nui Makeano Alodio. Okay? Kuleana Nui is freehold. Makeano Alodio, ano is that kind of, that type of allodial, which is fee simple. So if you take the royal patent, Palapala Silanui, in Hawaiian, and you pull the English translation of it, which is on the record, you will see in the English language, oh, okay. Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Danny.
You will see that this word alodial is fee simple. Yeah. But what people have tended to do is they looked at the royal patent or the Palapala Silanui, and they see the word alodial, and they assume it's allodial. And then they look it up in Black's Law Dictionary. And that's a completely different definition than what it is. So in all Hawaiian law, allodial is fee simple. That's all it is. It's not sovereign title. That's made up.
So what about the royal patents?
Royal patents are merely templates of government deeds that are issuing the fee simple title. That's all it is. So a royal patent is a template granting fee simple. Now, once a person gets fee simple, okay, that's called a freehold. And that term freehold, in the Hawaiian language, Kuleana Nui, exactly. Hey, right on. Yeah. So Kuleana Nui is freehold. Makeano alodio, fee simple, or malalo iho o ke ano alodio, less than fee simple, which is a life estate.
Freehold less than allodial.
Yeah, it's a life estate. That's the system that existed back then. Now, once you get a fee simple title under Hawaiian law, you're not beholden of a konahiki or chief above you. You become the chief of your own land. But you have to follow the law. Because if you commit high treason, guess what happens to your property? Yank. So what happens is the Hawaiian government actually owns the territory. Okay? The Hawaiian kingdom, the government, it owns the territory. And at times, it can exercise eminent domain. Eminent domain, eminent comes from the word eminency, high. Eminent domain, a higher title. So they can exercise eminent domain by basically taking property, and if it's constitutional system, compensate, right? Or if you're a communist government, like let's say Fidel Castro, you don't compensate, you just nationalize. And you take private property and you make it communist. In the Hawaiian Kingdom, even though you had fee simple title to ownership, that didn't mean you owned the land. All you did was that you had ownership of the control of the land. And a fee simple allows you to convey it, allows it to be inherited, right? But if you don't follow the rules, you lose it. That's why those people who committed high treason, the insurgents, President Cleveland asked Queen Liliuokalani, would you grant amnesty to these people? Because they would lose their property and lives. That's because they violated the rules of property in the Hawaiian Kingdom. That's really what the system is, right? So this allodial thing is getting out of hand. Yes.
Is it in your book too, Keanu?
No, that's well, I didn't have to put it in there, but Donovan Preza actually is doing his doctoral dissertation on it, and I'm sitting on his doctoral committee. And Donovan actually started his work on this, on land titles, because he took my class, the graduate course. Because perfect title, this is all the stuff we're doing. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say that we're running out of time, so you're gonna have to wrap it up in a few minutes.
Okay. So go ahead.
I just wanted to ask two questions, and one was, I think that probably many of us have been guilty of war crimes because perhaps we didn't know about it.
No, then that means you weren't guilty of war crimes. See,
No.
only when you know.
You claim ignorance.
Yeah, we never know.
Okay, so,
Yeah, it wasn't me, the song, wasn't me.
okay, and so I guess the other part is the United Nations doesn't have an enforcement arm. So the only way, and this here is a question, so the only way that we're really gonna get the huli or the changeover, transition.
Not transition, we're talking compliance.
Okay, thank you, compliance is by the kuka, so that everybody understands that what we're doing now is not right.
Well, it's not
What we
just,
need to do
it takes it beyond the kuka. Okay, so like before Jennifer Ruggles did what she did, there was a lot of kuka sessions to get her to understand what's going on. And then she took the step that she had to take, right? And that's what she did. So there is a stage where people will know what's going on and they understand, but they may not be at a stage to do anything at that point because it's still complex.
Right.
Once you start to get it, then you will know what you gotta do.
Yeah.
And I encourage people, don't do things that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just stand down, lay low, take care of your family, get educated. That's number one. Now, when people do step up, hey, this is like playing football.
Yeah.
It's not baseball anymore, right? And you get pulling guards coming.
Yeah.
And if you don't see that guy, you're gonna get cleaned out. I'm serious.
So he was a pulling guy.
No, so you might say we've been playing football using baseball rules. What I'm trying to teach people is what football rules are, but I'm not telling people play the game yet. Know the rules.
Yeah.
Start off small. Crawl, walk, run.
You get junior POEs first.
Yeah.
You make your way up.
Oh, exactly. And that's why education is really important. And it's foremost, right? And I believe in it. Because our kupuna believed in education.
Yes.
And there was a good system back then. And right now we're recovering our memory.
It's a renewing of the mind. Yeah.
And that's what we're going through right now. But people are doing what they gotta do. You know, when we went to The Hague in the Netherlands, we didn't wait till everybody woke up and say, hey, I understand. No, we went. Because we knew we could, but that's the ultimate test if it would work. If we really were who we said we are. But it's also kuleana. right? It's Kuleana, that's the point.
So
what would you suggest for families that are in the process of learning and need to try to retrieve their family Kuleana land?
Well, only you will know when you need to do what you gotta do. But if you're asking me what should you do, that means you guys not ready to do what you gotta do.
No, but, I mean, because of the.
Because you might have to tell me, hey, you know what, according to this law, with this, hey, we can do this. I'm like, hey, you got a point. See, it's not like you folks are relying on me to tell you what you gotta do, even though I may know what you guys gotta do, but it's premature at this stage. Because I don't want to get people set up because they believe in something. Because even though you believe in something, it may not be right. Or you may believe in something, it's right, but you don't know what you're engaging in. And then you put your own family in jeopardy.
Right.
You know.
But with the word allodial, like you're saying, it's getting out of hand.
Well, it's really not getting out of hand because it's frivolous anyway. It doesn't matter.
Trying to, clean back the one.
And that, okay, so if you're doing it that way, I would highly recommend stop. Because it's wrong. That's all I can say. Now, how you deal with land, the Geneva Convention deals with land. Private property can't be touched. Jennifer Ruggles is doing certain things that is going to affect all protected persons because that's her job. She's an agent for the United States who's a whistleblower. So if anything, how you support her? Me Too movement, I'm a protected person. Right? And that's really where this is at. Let people in positions who know what they're doing do what they got to do because they're also going to be held accountable to it too. And the people that are advising her, like myself, I'm going to get in trouble if it's wrong. And I have to be careful who I'm talking to make sure it's not going to be misconstrued into something that I didn't say. But she also has an attorney who's also advising her, and we work together. So it's a collective thing. It's not like, hey, we're going to tell everybody what we got to do.
Teamwork.
Right, and that's understandable, but is it time of the essence here to before anything else be done with the land and sold and being built on
If the land was taken illegally, that doesn't mean they own it. If somebody stole your car, that doesn't mean they own it. You can always get the car back if there is a procedure to do it. And these things are all part of this law of occupation. That's what's important to know, is that there are regulations that deal with these things. Right now we feel that we don't know what's going on because really we don't know the regulations. We don't know what to do to help what we're doing. But Jennifer Ruggles is getting some good advice from people who don't know what they're talking about. But it's not just talk, it's called action. With action comes consequences. And right now, people retaliating against her. She's getting a lot of hate mail. She's getting retaliation from the county council. She's getting retaliation by the police department. Oh no, this is bad. They're trying to pressure her.
Oh yeah, of course.
So that shows you how strong this Wahine is. Because she is morally and ethically grounded. And that's what I appreciate about this young Wahine. You know, and
I mean, somebody else doing the same thing with her?
Not
I
yet.
mean,
Oh, no.
you know what I mean?
Not yet.
But see, that's part of the Me Too movement, so the whistleblowers and the protected persons. See, people just have to start to know who they are when they say something. And they have to know not to say something if they don't know what they're talking about. Because I'm not one to get more people in problems if it's wrong. Now, when I was advising people as a consultant in, hey, you know what? In this foreclosure, this court doesn't legally exist, no jurisdiction. An attorney will come in to argue subject matter jurisdiction, Rule 12B1. It's all regulated, it's all procedural. And then you have title insurance to cover your loan so you're not running away from a debt. You know, everything is covered. And all of a sudden, when the state of Hawaii starts going after these people and getting them out and forcing them out, then they turn to me, hey, it's your fault. Really, so it's my fault for telling the truth. But it's not their fault for ripping you off. How did that happen?
Wrong timing.
No, it's just excuse. But it doesn't stop from it being right. So that's, all that is what Desai said in his letter about colluding and enabling and plundering. You know, but aside from all that, tonight was supposed to be The birth of an armed force called the state of Hawaii.
Great straw model.
And I think we've accomplished that point.
You gotta come back, you gotta come back.
So be in tune. Go to hawaiiankingdom.org/blog. Follow the blog. You're gonna see the latest information coming out, and also Big Island Video News and other stuff. But we'll see. We'll see how things go work out.
Thank you, Keanu.
Thank you.
I don't think anybody leave because I need to take a photo.
Yeah, please take a peek.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Okay, and
We
then.
don't work for the feds.